They saved one of us. We came back for all of them Part 1. The alarm screams echoed through Research Station Harmony 7 as Dr. Kim Dae-ho ran down the narrow metal corridor. His white lab coat flew behind him as he clutched a data pad containing 3 years of research on alien plant life. The station shook violently as another explosion hit the outer hull. All personnel to evacuation stations. Lieutenant Park Soo-bin's voice crackled over the intercom. This is not a drill. Krex forces are boarding the station. Dae-ho had never seen the Krex before, but everyone in human space knew their reputation. They were 7 feet tall with gray skin like stone and 4 arms that ended in claws. They took prisoners only to sell them as slaves on distant worlds. They showed no mercy to any species they considered weak. The station rocked again. Through a small window, Dae-ho could see the massive Krex warships surrounding their tiny research outpost. The human vessels looked like toys next to the alien giants. Red laser fire lit up the darkness of space as the last human fighter ships tried desperately to hold them back. Dae-ho reached the evacuation bay just as another blast sent him flying into the wall. Pain shot through his left shoulder, but he forced himself to keep moving. Around him, his fellow researchers and technicians were climbing into the escape pods. There were only 3 pods left, and each one could hold 4 people. Dae-ho, called Dr. Lisa Chen, waving him toward the nearest pod. Hurry! But as Dae-ho took a step forward, the lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red light. The station's computer voice spoke in its calm, emotionless tone. Hull breach detected. Sections 7 through 12 are now sealed. Dae-ho's heart sank. The medical bay was in Section 9. 3 of his research team were still there, helping the injured station medic Nurse Ko Min-ji. She had stayed behind to treat the wounded, refusing to leave until everyone was stable enough to move. Wait! Dae-ho shouted as Dr. Chen's pod began to close. Min-ji and the others are still in medical. Lieutenant Park Soo-bin appeared at Dae-ho's side, her uniform torn and her face covered in soot. She grabbed his arm. The blast doors are sealed. We can't reach them. We have to try. There's no time. Soo-bin's voice was firm, but her eyes showed the pain of command. The Krex boarding parties will be here in minutes. If we don't leave, now we all die. Another explosion, closer this time. The station tilted as artificial gravity failed in some sections. Dae-ho could hear the sound of metal tearing somewhere in the distance. Get in the pod, Soo-bin ordered. Dae-ho shook his head, not without Min-ji and the others. That's an order, Doctor. But before Dae-ho could respond, the corridor behind them exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. The blast threw both humans to the ground. Dae-ho felt something heavy hit his back, and warm liquid ran down his face. When he tried to stand, his legs wouldn't work properly. Soo-bin struggled to her feet, blood running from a cut on her forehead. She looked at the blocked corridor, then at Dae-ho, then at the 2 remaining escape pods. 8 people still needed to evacuate, but there were only 8 seats left. Sir, called Corporal James Wright from the nearest pod. We need to go now. Through the broken corridor, they could hear the sound of heavy footsteps and harsh alien voices speaking in the Krex language. The boarding party was getting closer. Soo-bin made the hardest decision of her military career. She grabbed Dae-ho under his arms and tried to lift him, but he cried out in pain. Something was definitely broken in his back. Leave me, Dae-ho whispered. Get the others out. No. Soo-bin's voice was hard as steel. No one gets left behind. But even as she said it, they both knew there wasn't enough time. The footsteps were getting closer. Someone in the remaining pods was shouting that the launch systems were failing. If they waited much longer, no one would escape. Dae-ho grabbed Soo-bin's hand. Listen to me. Min-ji and her team, they're in the sealed medical bay. The Krex might not find them right away. They could hide until help comes. But only if you get out of here and tell Earth what happened. The alien voices were right outside the blast door now. They could hear tools cutting through metal. I won't leave you, Soo-bin said, but her voice was breaking. Yes, you will. Dae-ho tried to smile. Because you're a good officer, and good officers save who they can. He pressed his datapad into her hands. Take this. The research. It's important. Subin stared at him for a long moment. Then she leaned down and spoke into his ear. I promise you, Deho. We'll come back for you, I swear it. She kissed his forehead, then ran to the last pod. The door slammed shut just as the blast door behind them exploded inward. Deho watched through the small window as the escape pods launched into space. He hoped they would make it to the human ships before the Kreks caught them. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Lieutenant Park Subin's face in the pod window, tears streaming down her cheeks as she kept her promise to look back. When Deho woke up, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The station's engines had stopped humming. The air recyclers had shut down. He was lying in the twisted wreckage of the corridor, covered by a piece of broken ceiling. His whole body hurt, but he was alive. Moving carefully, he pushed the debris away and tried to stand. His left leg was badly injured, and his back sent waves of pain through his entire body with every movement. But he could walk, slowly. The station was dark except for a few emergency lights that still worked. As Deho limped through the corridors, he found signs that the Kreks had been there. Doors had been torn off their hinges. Computer terminals were smashed. But strangely, he found no bodies. Either his friends had escaped or the Kreks had taken them. He made his way to the medical bay, hoping to find Minji and her team alive. The blast doors were still sealed, but the manual override still worked. When the heavy doors slowly opened, Deho called out softly, "Minji, are you there?" Silence. The medical bay was empty but undamaged. There were signs that people had been there recently, medical supplies scattered on the floor, 3 beds with rumpled sheets. On one of the beds was a note written in Minji's handwriting. "Gone to try to reach the communications array. If anyone finds this, we're hiding in Maintenance Tunnel C7. Deho smiled despite everything. Minji was smart and brave. If anyone could survive on the station until help came, it was her, but help might be a long time coming. Deho found some medical supplies and treated his wounds as best he could. The pain medicine helped, but he knew he was badly hurt. Without proper treatment, he might not live more than a few days. He decided to try to reach the communications array. Maybe he could send a distress signal. Maybe Subin had made it back to Earth and a rescue ship was already coming. It took him 6 hours to cross the station. He had to rest frequently, and twice he had to hide when he heard strange noises. But finally he reached the communication center. The main transmitter was destroyed, but there was a small emergency beacon still working. Deho activated it and recorded a message. "This is Dr. Kim Deho of Research Station Harmony 7. The station has been attacked by Kreks forces. Some crew members may still be alive and in hiding. We need immediate assistance." He set the beacon to repeat the message every hour, then collapsed in the operator's chair. All he could do now was wait and hope that someone would hear his call for help. For 3 days, Deho lived alone in the ruined station. He found some food in the emergency supplies and enough water to survive. His injuries were getting worse, but he was still alive. He had not found Minji or her team, but he had not found their bodies either. He chose to believe they were still hiding somewhere in the station's maze of tunnels and service areas. On the 3rd day, Deho was sleeping in the communication center when he heard a new sound, the soft hum of ship engines docking with the station. His heart jumped. Had the rescue ships finally arrived? But when he looked at the external cameras, he saw something unexpected. The ship attached to the station was not human. It was long and curved like a seashell, with a smooth silver surface that seemed to glow with its own light. Deho had never seen anything like it. The ship's airlock opened, and 3 figures in environmental suits stepped onto the station. They moved slowly and carefully, and their suits were different from anything humans used. Instead of the bulky white suits human astronauts wore, these were form-fitting and seemed to be made of the same glowing material as their ship. One of the figures was clearly the leader. She was taller than the others and moved with authority. When she spoke, her voice was musical and strange, but the universal translator in Deho's communication equipment let him understand her words. Life signs detected in this section, she said to her companions. One individual, weakened but alive. Elder Velthara, said one of the others. The ship's records show this station was attacked by Krex raiders. We should not become involved in primitive conflicts. All consciousness is precious, the leader replied firmly. We cannot leave a thinking being to die alone. They found Deho in the communication center. When the leader removed her helmet, he saw a face unlike anything in his experience. Her skin was pale blue with silver markings that seemed to shift in the light. Her eyes were large and kind, and her head was hairless but covered with the same silver patterns that decorated her skin. I am Velthara of... They saved one of us. We came back for all of them. Part 2. 5 years had passed since the attack on Research Station Harmony 7, and the galaxy had grown more dangerous with each passing month. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Soul's Promise, watching the stars through the main viewing screen. His ship was small compared to the military vessels of other species, but it was fast and well-armed enough to handle most threats in this part of space. The Krex Empire had grown bolder since their attack on the research station. They now controlled 17 star systems that had once been independent, and their slave markets were busier than ever. The galactic community condemned their actions in official statements, but no one was willing to actually fight them. The Krex were too strong and everyone else was too afraid. Captain, called Communications Officer Yoon So-ra from her station. We're receiving a transmission. It's very weak and badly damaged. Minho walked over to her console. Can you clean it up? I'm trying, sir. It's coming from the Thylorian home systems, but there's a lot of interference. Minho knew about the Thylorians. Everyone in human space had heard the story of Dr. Kim Dae-ho and how the peaceful aliens had saved his life. Dae-ho now worked as a special advisor to the human government, helping them understand alien cultures. He often spoke about Thylorian kindness and wisdom. There, I've got it, So-ra said. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they could see a familiar face. It was Velthara, the Thylorian elder who had rescued Dae-ho. But she looked different now. Her normally calm expression was filled with fear, and the silver markings on her skin seemed dim and faded. Behind her, Minho could see smoke and the glow of fires. This is Elder Velthara of Thyler Prime, the message began. Her musical voice was strained and tired. If anyone receives this transmission, please know that we tried to live in peace. The Krex Empire has demanded our surrender. They want to strip mine our worlds and enslave our people. The image flickered as explosions could be heard in the background. We have no weapons, no armies. We never learned the ways of war because we believed that all consciousness was precious, that no thinking being would willingly harm another. We were wrong. Velthara looked directly at the camera, and Minho felt like she was speaking directly to him. The Krex come in great numbers. Their warships fill our skies like a plague of metal insects. We ask not for salvation, for we know that would require others to risk their lives for strangers. We ask only that someone remember we tried to live in peace, that we tried to heal rather than harm, that we tried to build rather than destroy. The transmission began to break up with static. To our human friends, especially Dr. Kim Dae-ho, please know that saving your life was the greatest honor of our existence. In our philosophy, every act of compassion creates ripples that spread throughout the universe. Perhaps our small kindness will somehow make the galaxy a better place even after we are gone. The screen went black. The bridge of Soul's Promise was completely silent. Sir, So-ra said quietly, the transmission ended 4 hours ago. By now, I know. Minho's voice was hard. The Thylorians were probably already dead or enslaved. Within hours, the message had reached every human world. On Earth, in the halls of government, military leaders and politicians gathered for an emergency session. Admiral Choi Yun-jung, head of Human Defense Command, stood before a room full of officials who were all talking at once. Order! Admiral Choi called out. We need to discuss our response to the situation in Thylorian space. What response? Asked General Harrison Webb, the Earth Defense Force commander. The Thylorians are 300 light-years away. By the time we could get there, it would all be over. Even if we could get there in time, added Secretary of Defense Maria Santos. What could we do? Intelligence reports say the Krex have sent over 800 warships to Thylorian space. We have maybe 200 vessels in our entire fleet, and most of those are patrol boats and cargo ships. The math is simple, said President Yoon Soo-jung from her seat at the head of the table. We cannot win a direct fight with the Krex Empire. Any attempt to help the Thylorians would only result in humanity being their next target. Around the table, heads nodded in agreement. It was a cold but logical decision. Humanity was still young in galactic terms, still building their strength. They could not afford to make enemies of powers like the Krex. There is one more thing to consider, Admiral Choi said. She pressed a button, and the main screen showed a star map with human colonies marked in blue and Krex territory marked in red. If the Krex take the Thylorian systems, they'll control the main hyperspace routes between our space and the galactic core. We'll be cut off from potential allies and trade partners. All the more reason to avoid a fight we can't win, General Webb replied. We need to focus on defending our own worlds. But before President Yoon could call for a vote, the conference room door opened. Dr. Kim Dae-ho walked in, followed by several other survivors from Research Station Harmony 7. Min-ho recognized Lieutenant Park Soo-bin, now promoted to colonel, and Dr. Lisa Chen. Mr. President, Dae-ho said formally, we request permission to address this assembly. President Yoon looked surprised. Dr. Kim, this is a classified military briefing. I know, but I also know you're discussing the fate of the people who saved my life. Dae-ho walked to the center of the room. Despite being in his 50s now, he moved with quiet confidence. I've spent the last 5 years working with our government studying alien cultures and helping humanity understand our place in the galaxy. I've learned many things, but the most important lesson came from 3 weeks I spent aboard a Thylorian ship. He activated a small holographic projector. Images appeared in the air above the conference table, the interior of the gentle current. Velthara and her crew working to heal Dae-ho's injuries. Thylorian cities with their flowing architecture and gardens of light. The Thylorians have technology that's centuries ahead of ours, Dae-ho continued. They could have used me as a test subject, learned about human biology and sold that information to our enemies. They could have left me to die and avoided any trouble with the Krex. They could have saved me and then demanded payment or favors. The images shifted to show Thylorian medical equipment, their advanced ships, their vast libraries of scientific knowledge. Instead, they spent weeks healing me with their most advanced medicine. They shared their knowledge freely. They asked for nothing in return. When I was well enough to leave, Elder Velthara gave me a gift, a small device that could translate any language in the galaxy. She said it was so I could help my people communicate with others, so we could build friendships instead of making enemies. Dae-ho paused and looked around the room at the faces of Earth's most powerful leaders. When I asked her why they had helped me, Velthara said something I'll never forget. All consciousness is precious. Every thinking being is connected to every other. When one suffers, we all suffer. When one dies alone, we all die a little. Colonel. Park Soo-bin stepped forward. Sir, I was the officer who made the decision to leave Dr. Kim behind on the station. I promised him we'd come back. The Thylorians kept that promise when we couldn't. The question before us, Dae-ho said, is simple. What kind of people are we? Are we the kind who forget kindness when it becomes inconvenient? Are we the kind who let good people die because saving them is dangerous? Or are we the kind who remember that someone saved one of us when they had every reason to let me die? The room was quiet for a long moment. Then President Yoon spoke. Dr. Kim, we all admire your loyalty to the Thylorians, but we have to think about the survival of our own species. We cannot risk humanity's future for one alien race, no matter how grateful we are to them. Dae-ho nodded slowly. I understand your concern, Mr. President, but I think you're wrong about the risk. He changed the holographic display to show star charts and military analyses. The Krex Empire is built on fear and conquest. They expand by convincing everyone that resistance is hopeless. Every species they conquer makes them stronger and everyone else weaker. The display showed the progression of Krek's expansion over the past 20 years. If we let the Thylorians fall without even trying to help, what message does that send to the galaxy? That humanity can't be trusted? That we abandon our friends when things get difficult? How many species will want to ally with us after that? General Webb shook his head. Even if you're right about the political implications, the military reality hasn't changed. We don't have enough ships to fight the Kreks. We don't have enough ships to fight them the way they expect, Deho agreed. But humanity has never fought the way our enemies expected. He brought up new images, scenes from Earth's history of warfare, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. We're not the biggest species in the galaxy, or the strongest, or the most advanced. But we're the species that survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed us. We're the species that turned disadvantage into advantage, that won battles we should have lost by refusing to fight the way our enemies wanted us to fight. Colonel Subin stepped up beside him. The Kreks expect easy victories against species that follow galactic conventions of warfare. They expect battles fought with honor and formal rules. They don't expect guerrilla. They saved one of us. We came back for all of them. Part 3. The first Kreks warships appeared in Thylorian space like a dark storm cloud blotting out the stars. Admiral Krixthak stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Iron Fang, and watched his fleet of 800 vessels take positions around the peaceful worlds of the Thylorian system. This would be an easy conquest. The Thylorians had no military, no weapons, no concept of war. Begin the bombardment of their orbital stations, Krixthak ordered his weapons officer. Show them what happens to those who possess resources the Empire needs. The first strikes lit up the darkness around Thyler Prime. Thylorian science stations and communication arrays exploded in brilliant flashes of light. On the planet's surface, Elder Velthara watched the destruction from the Great Crystal Observatory, where she had spent decades studying the stars and searching for signs of other intelligent life. Elder, said her assistant Lysandra, the High Council requests your immediate presence. We must decide how to respond to this attack. Velthara touched the silver markings on her forehead, a gesture of deep sadness among her people. What response can there be? We are a people of healing, not harming. We have no weapons to fight with, no warriors to send into battle. But even as she spoke, Velthara was thinking of the communication equipment Dr. Kim Dae-ho had helped them install 5 years ago. Before the Kreks could jam all their transmissions, she had managed to send one message toward human space. She did not know if anyone would receive it, and she did not expect anyone to risk their lives for a people they barely knew. The Kreks' assault was swift and overwhelming. Within hours, they had destroyed every orbital facility and landed occupation forces on all 3 Thylorian worlds. But something strange happened as the gray-skinned invaders marched through the crystal cities. The Thylorians did not fight back, but they also did not surrender. Instead, they simply disappeared. Where are they? Krixthak demanded as his troops reported empty buildings and abandoned streets. Scans showed millions of life forms on these worlds. They cannot have simply vanished. What the Kreks commander did not understand was that the Thylorians had spent centuries building their cities not just on the surface of their worlds, but deep underground. Their crystal architecture extended down through miles of living rock, connected by tunnels that had been grown rather than dug. When the attack began, the entire Thylorian population had retreated into these hidden spaces. Elder Velthara now found herself in the deepest chambers beneath the capital city, surrounded by thousands of her people who looked to her for guidance. The great crystal walls around them glowed softly with their own inner light, providing both illumination and a sense of peace in these dark times. What do we do now? Asked Kethmore, one of her oldest friends and advisors. The Kreks will eventually find these chambers. When they do, we will have nowhere left to run. Velthara closed her large eyes and thought about the human she had helped heal 5 years ago. Dae-ho had told her stories about his people's history, about wars and struggles that had lasted generations. She had not understood then how any species could choose conflict over peace. Now, facing the extinction of her own people, she began to see that sometimes violence found you whether you wanted it or not. "We cannot fight them with weapons," she said to the gathered crowd. "But we are not helpless. We know these worlds better than the invaders do. We understand the science that makes our cities and ships function. Perhaps we cannot win a war, but we can make ourselves too difficult to conquer." Over the following days, the Thylorians began a campaign of peaceful resistance, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They used their knowledge of stellar engineering to destabilize the local star, creating solar flares that interfered with Krek's communications. They programmed their city's crystal systems to produce psychic interference that caused headaches and confusion among the occupying forces. Most importantly, they made themselves impossible to catch. Whenever Krek's troops found one of their hiding places, the Thylorians would retreat deeper underground, sealing passages behind them and opening new ones in different locations. The planet itself seemed to be working against the invaders. Admiral Krixthak grew more frustrated with each passing day. "How can we enslave people we cannot find?" he roared at his subordinates. "How can we strip mine worlds when the mining equipment keeps breaking down for no reason?" "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "our scientists believe the Thylorians are using some form of advanced technology to manipulate matter at the molecular level. They appear to be able to alter the structure of rock and metal by thought alone." "Impossible. No species has such abilities." "Nevertheless, sir, our mining lasers now turn to rust when they touch the planetary surface. Our scanning equipment produces false readings. Even our food synthesizers are producing meals that taste like dirt." What the Kreks did not understand was that Thylorian science was based on a completely different approach to technology. While most galactic races built machines to impose their will on the universe, the Thylorians had learned to work in harmony with natural forces. Their technology was really a form of applied empathy. They could sense the desires of matter itself and guide those desires toward useful outcomes. But this resistance came at a cost. The Thylorians were not warriors by nature, and the constant stress of hiding and fighting wore on them. Many became sick with despair. The silver markings on their skin, which normally glowed with health and contentment, began to dim. Some of the elders spoke of simply surrendering to end the suffering of their people. It was during one of these dark discussions that Velthara received an impossible message. She was in her private chamber, deep beneath the city, when her personal communication device, a crystal that resonated with quantum frequencies, began to glow. The device should not have worked at all. The Kreks were jamming every form of communication they knew about. But this message was coming through on channels the invaders did not know existed. The crystal projected a small hologram into the air. Velthara gasped when she recognized the face. It was Dr. Kim Dae-ho, older now, but unmistakably the human she had saved 5 years ago. "Elder Velthara," the message began, "if you are receiving this, then you are alive and there is still hope. I want you to know that your message reached us. More importantly, it reached the right people. People who understand that debts must be paid." The hologram flickered as the signal struggled through layers of Kreks jamming. "I cannot tell you exactly when we will arrive, because the Kreks might intercept this message. But I can tell you this. You saved one of us when you had every reason to let me die. Now we are coming back for all of you." Daeho's image smiled, and Velthara felt her markings begin to glow brighter for the first time in weeks. "Hold on, my friends. Hold on just a little longer. And when you see ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of your system, know that every human aboard them volunteered to be there. They came not because their government ordered them to, not because they expect any reward, but because they believe what you taught me. All consciousness is precious." The message ended, leaving Velthara staring at empty air. Around her, other Thylorians had gathered to listen. Word spread quickly through the underground chambers. For the first time since the invasion began, there was hope. 3 days later, Admiral Krixthak was reviewing casualty reports when his sensor officer called out in alarm. "Sir, massive hyperspace signatures detected at the edge of the system." Krixthak moved to the tactical display. "Show me." The screen lit up with icons representing incoming ships. At first, there were only a few dozen contacts, then a few dozen more, then hundreds. How many ships? Crixthak demanded. Still counting, sir. The fleet appears to be significant. Give me numbers. 127 vessels, sir. Mixed classes, warships, converted cargo haulers, civilian craft that have been armed. The configuration is unusual. Crixthak studied the display. 127 ships against his 800. The mathematics were simple. Identify the species. Who dares challenge the Krex Empire? The sensor officer worked frantically at his console. When he looked up, his expression was confused. Sir, the ships are broadcasting human identification codes. Humans? Crixthak laughed. The primitive species that builds tiny research stations on the edge of nowhere? What could they possibly hope to accomplish here? His communication officer looked up from his station. Sir, we're receiving a transmission on all frequencies. It's from the human fleet. Put it on screen. Let's see what these insects have to say. The main viewing screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at the bridge of a human warship. A woman in a blue military uniform stood at the center of the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back. Her expression was calm but determined. Attention, Krex Fleet, she said. I am Admiral Choi Yun-jung of the Human Defense Force. You are currently occupying the sovereign territory of our allies, the Thylorian Confederation. You will withdraw your forces immediately and release any prisoners you have taken. Crixthak gestured for his communications officer to open a response channel. Human Admiral, he said, his voice full of contempt. You are either very brave or very stupid. You have barely 100 ships. I have 800. Leave. They saved one of us. We came back for all of them. Part 4. The silence after battle was always the hardest part. Admiral Choi Yun-jung stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, looking out at a star field littered with the wreckage of both human and Krex vessels. The enemy fleet was gone, retreating to their home territory with less than half their original ships. The Thylorian worlds were free, but victory had come at a price that made her heart ache. Final casualty reports, Admiral. Her aide, Commander Park Bo-young, said quietly. 43 ships lost, 17 more damaged beyond repair. We estimate 4,300 casualties. Choi closed her eyes. Over 4,000 human beings had died to save a species most of them had never met. Parents, children, friends, all gone because they believed in keeping a promise made to strangers. What about the Krex losses? Much heavier, ma'am. Our ramming attacks and the help from the Ilari and Vorthan fleets cost them over 300 ships. Admiral Crixthak's flagship was completely destroyed. Intelligence suggests he did not survive. Through the view screen, Choi could see the curved silver shapes of Thylorian rescue vessels moving among the wreckage, searching for survivors from both sides. Even after being invaded and attacked, the peaceful aliens were trying to save the lives of their enemies. It was exactly what Dr. Daeho had told them to expect. Admiral, called the communications officer, we're receiving a transmission from the surface of Thyler Prime. Put it through. The screen flickered, and suddenly, Choi was looking at a familiar face. Elder Velthara appeared much as she had in Dr. Daeho's old recordings. Tall, graceful, with silver markings that glowed softly on her blue skin. But there was something different in her large eyes now, a sadness mixed with overwhelming gratitude. Admiral, Choi, Velthara said, her musical voice carrying across the void between ship and planet. There are no words in any language to express what your people have done for us today. You came across the galaxy to save strangers. You risked everything for people you owed nothing to. Choi found her voice. Elder Velthara, we had a debt to pay. You saved one of us when you could have left him to die. We came back for all of you, just as we promised. And the cost? Velthara's voice broke slightly. So many of your people died for us. How can we ever repay such a sacrifice? Before Choi could answer, another voice spoke from behind her. You don't need to repay anything. Dr. Kim Dae-ho stepped into view of the camera. He was wearing a simple civilian outfit, not a military uniform. But everyone on both sides of the conversation knew he was the reason they were all there. "Elder," Dae-ho said, "5 years ago you taught me that all consciousness is precious. Today my species proved they learned that lesson. The humans who died here didn't die for payment or reward. They died because they believed what you believe, that every thinking being matters, that we're all connected." Velthara's markings glowed brighter. "Dr. Dae-ho, my dear friend, I had hoped to see you again, but not under such terrible circumstances. I know, but sometimes good things require terrible prices. The important thing is that your people are free, and the galaxy has learned something new about humanity." Over the following days, as human medical ships worked alongside Thylorian healers to treat the wounded from both fleets, the true impact of the battle began to spread throughout galactic civilization. The news traveled faster than the fastest. Ships carried by quantum communication networks to every inhabited system. On Earth, President Yoon Soo-jung addressed a joint session of the Global Assembly. Behind her, a massive screen showed images from the Thylorian system. Human and alien medical personnel working side by side, Thylorian crystal cities beginning to emerge from their underground hiding places, and the combined fleets of 4 different species standing guard against any future Krex attacks. Today, President Yoon said, humanity took its place in galactic civilization not as conquerors or traitors or diplomats, but as defenders of the principle that no peaceful people should face extinction alone. We did not fight for territory or resources. We fought because a debt of honor demanded payment. In the audience, families of the fallen listened with quiet pride. They had lost sons and daughters, husbands and wives, but those losses had meaning. Their loved ones had died to save an entire civilization. But the real changes were happening far from Earth, in systems throughout the galaxy, where species that had lived in fear of stronger neighbors began to whisper a new possibility. What if they didn't have to be afraid anymore? On the industrial world of Kepler Station, a group of Zephyrian miners who had been enslaved by the Krex for 10 years heard about the human victory and began planning their escape. If humans could defeat the Krex Empire to save strangers, maybe the Zephyrians could find allies to help them win their freedom. In the Outer Rim territories, 3 smaller species that had been paying tribute to various warlords sent secret messages to human space, asking if the offer of protection extended to others beyond the Thylorians. The Krex Empire itself was in chaos. Admiral Krixthak's defeat had shown their enemies that the mighty Krex fleet could be beaten. Rebellions broke out on a dozen enslaved worlds. Pirates who had operated under Krex protection suddenly found their bases under attack by species they had thought were too weak to fight back. But perhaps the most important changes were happening in the halls of power on civilized worlds throughout the galaxy. Ambassador Shin Da-eun stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, addressing representatives of over 200 species. The vast amphitheater was packed with beings of every imaginable shape and size, all of them trying to understand what the human victory meant for the future. Honored delegates, Ambassador Shin began. For too long, this galaxy has operated on the principle that might makes right. The strong prey upon the weak, and the weak accept their fate because they believe resistance is hopeless. The Krex invasion of Thylorian space was just the latest example of this ancient pattern. She gestured to a holographic display showing the battle statistics. But humanity has proven that this pattern can be broken. We showed that a smaller force, fighting for the right reasons, can defeat a larger one, fighting only for conquest. We showed that species can risk everything to help others, not for profit or strategic advantage, but simply because it's the right thing to do. In the audience, delegates shifted uncomfortably. Many of their governments had ignored the Thylorian calls for help, calculating that involvement would be too costly or too dangerous. Today, Ambassador Shin continued, I formally propose the creation of the Mutual Defense Alliance, a treaty organization based on the principle that no peaceful species should face extinction alone. Any member nation that comes under attack by an aggressive power can call upon all other members for immediate assistance. The hall erupted in discussion. Some delegates were enthusiastic, seeing an opportunity to finally stand up to the various empires and warlords that threatened smaller worlds. Others were skeptical, wondering if humanity could really be trusted to honor such sweeping commitments. The Alari representative, a tall being with crystalline skin, stood to address the assembly. The Alari Federation has observed human behavior closely during the recent conflict. We were impressed by their willingness to sacrifice for beings they barely knew. We formally endorse this proposal and pledge our fleet to its defense. One by one, other species began to declare their support. The Vorthon clans, who respected courage above all else. The Aquinas Collective, whose water worlds had been threatened by Krek's expansion. The peaceful gardener species, whose living ships had been destroyed by raiders while the galaxy watched and did nothing. By the end of the session, 47 species had signed the preliminary treaty. It was the largest military alliance in galactic history, and it existed because humanity had proven that some things were worth fighting for. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. In the deep space fortress that served as the Krek's Empire's capital, war leader Thakmor addressed his surviving admirals with cold fury. "The humans have humiliated us," he growled, his forearms clenched into fists. "They have turned our defeat into a rallying cry for every weak species in the galaxy. Already we have lost 6 systems to rebellions inspired by their example." "War leader," said one of his advisors, "perhaps it is time to consider a negotiated peace. The humans have proven they are more dangerous than we believed." Thakmor's claws extended from his fingertips. "There will be no peace with the humans. They have declared themselves protectors of the weak, guardians of the helpless. Very well, we will show them what happens to guardians when the thing they guard is taken away." He turned to his intelligence chief. "Begin preparations for Operation Final Lesson. If the humans want to play hero, we will give them more disasters than they can possibly handle. We will attack their allies simultaneously across a dozen systems. Let's see how many promises they can keep when their fleet is scattered across the galaxy." Meanwhile, on the rebuilt surface of Thyler Prime, a very different kind of meeting was taking place. Dr. Kim Dae-ho walked through the crystal gardens with Elder Velthara, both of them moving slowly and talking quietly about the future. "Your people have changed the galaxy," Velthara said, her silver markin. "They saved one of us. We came back for all of them." Part 5. 20 years had passed since the Battle of Thyler Prime, and the galaxy was a very different place. Fleet Admiral Kim Hae-jin stood on the observation deck of the massive space station, Harmony's Promise, looking out at the largest gathering of ships in galactic history. Representatives from over 300 species had assembled here, in orbit around the rebuilt world of New Thylorian, for the 20th anniversary of what historians now called the Great Liberation. Yi-jin was the daughter of Dr. Kim Dae-ho, the man whose rescue by the Thylorians had started it all. She had grown up hearing stories of her father's time aboard the Gentle Current, of Elder Velthara's kindness, and of the humans who had died to keep a promise to strangers. Now, at 45 years old, she commanded the largest peaceful fleet in galactic history. The Mutual Defense Alliance had grown far beyond anything the founders had imagined. What had begun as 47 species pledging to protect each other had become a galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had once been enemies. Scientific knowledge was shared openly. Children of a dozen different species played together in the parks of integrated colonies, but the galaxy was not entirely at peace. Even now, Hae-jin could see the patrol ships moving along the outer edges of the fleet formation, watching for signs of the enemy that had refused to accept the new order. "Admiral," called her aide, Commander Yoon Jae-min, "we're receiving the final status reports from all sectors. The memorial ceremony can begin whenever you're ready." Hae-jin nodded and made her way to the station's great amphitheater. The vast space was filled with beings of every imaginable shape and size, all gathered to remember the humans who had died to save the Thylorians, and to celebrate the civilization that had grown from their sacrifice. On the central platform, a holographic monument displayed the names of every human who had died in the liberation. The list seemed to go on forever, each name representing someone who had chosen to risk everything for people they had never met. Elder Velthara, now ancient even by Thylorian standards, walked slowly to the podium. Her silver markings had dimmed, with age, but her voice was still clear and musical when she spoke. "My friends," she began, "20 years ago, a young human doctor named Kim Dae-ho taught me something about his species that I had not understood before. When I asked him why humans fought so often, he told me that his people had learned to fight not for conquest, but for each other." She paused, looking out at the audience of humans, Thylorians, Ilari, Vorthans, and dozens of other species. I did not believe him then. But when the Krex came to destroy us and when humanity answered our call for help, I learned that he was right. Humans do not fight because they love war. They fight because they love peace so much that they will die to protect it. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Today we remember not just the humans who died for us, but the lesson they taught the entire galaxy. That kindness is not weakness, that compassion is not foolishness, and that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to risk everything for someone else. As Velthara stepped away from the podium, Admiral He-Jin took her place. She activated a holographic display that showed a map of the galaxy, with green lights marking the worlds protected by the Alliance and red lights showing areas still controlled by hostile forces. "The work is not finished," she said. "There are still species that choose conquest over cooperation, still worlds where the strong prey upon the weak. But look at this map and see how much has changed." The display zoomed in on specific systems where recent liberation operations had taken place. Last month, we freed the Crystalline Collective from 3 centuries of slavery. The month before, we helped the nomad fleets establish permanent homes after 1,000 years of wandering. This week, we received a request for help from the far, Spiral, species so distant we didn't even know they existed until now. She looked out at the audience, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of different worlds. Each time we answer one of these calls, someone asks me the same question. Why does humanity continue to fight battles that are not ours? Why do we risk our people for strangers? Why don't we just protect our own worlds and let the rest of the galaxy sort itself out? He-Jin smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like her father. The answer is simple. You saved one of us. We came back for all of them, and we discovered that them includes everyone who believes that kindness matters more than strength, that compassion matters more than conquest. The ceremony continued for hours, with speakers from dozens of different species sharing stories of liberation, cooperation, and hope. But the most moving moment came near the end, when an unexpected voice spoke from the audience. A figure in a simple gray robe stood up in the back of the amphitheater. When she lowered her hood, gasps echoed through the chamber. It was a Krex female, her gray skin marked with the scars of old battles and her forearms showing signs of hard labor. "My name is Velthara Krix. I took the name of the elder who saved my life when my own people would have left me to die," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I am a former slave soldier of the Krex Empire, and I have a story to tell." Admiral He-Jin gestured for the security teams to stand down. She had heard rumors about Krex defectors, but had never met one in person. 20 years ago, Velthara Krix continued, I was part of the fleet that attacked the Thylorian worlds. I believed what my commanders told me, that conquest was natural, that the strong had the right to rule the weak, that mercy was a form of weakness. She paused, looking around at the mixed audience of former enemies. But when the human fleet arrived, something changed in me. I watched beings who were smaller and weaker than us fight with a courage I had never seen. They died to protect people they barely knew. They sacrificed their own lives so that others could live free. The amphitheater was completely silent now. After the battle, I was taken prisoner by a human medical ship. I expected torture, execution, or slavery, the fate that Krex prisoners usually receive. Instead, they healed my wounds and asked me what I wanted to do with my life. Velthara Krix's voice began to shake with emotion. For the first time in my existence, someone asked me what I wanted instead of ordering me what to do. I didn't know how to answer. So they gave me time to think, and books to read, and teachers to explain ideas I had never heard of before. They taught me about compassion, about cooperation, about building instead of destroying. She looked directly at Admiral Hyajin. I have spent the last 15 years working with other former Krek slaves, helping them escape from the Empire and find new lives in Alliance space. We have established colonies where former enemies work together, where children learn that differences make us stronger instead of weaker. The Krek's defector reached into her robe and pulled out a small crystal device, Thylorian technology adapted for Krek's use. This communication array reaches into the heart of the Empire, to slaves and prisoners who dream of freedom. Every week, more of my former people hear about the Alliance and choose to risk everything for the chance to live in a galaxy where kindness matters more than conquest. She activated the device, and suddenly the amphitheater was filled with voices. Hundreds of Krek's individuals sending messages of hope and gratitude from hidden locations throughout their former empire. You saved one human, Belthara Krix concluded. And that led you to save all the Thylorians. Saving the Thylorians led you to save dozens of other species. And now, you are saving us from ourselves. The ripples of compassion have reached even into the heart of darkness. As the ceremony ended and beings from across the galaxy mingled in the station's corridors, Admiral Hyajin found herself standing once again at the observation window. But this time, she was not alone. Elder Velthara had joined her, along with several other key figures from the Alliance. "Admiral," said Ambassador Shinda-un, now an elderly woman but still sharp and determined, "we've received word from the Outer Rim. The Harvester Empire has awakened from their long sleep in the galactic core. Intelligence suggests they're planning to resume their expansion campaigns." Hyajin nodded grimly. The Harvesters were machines, artificial intelligences that had once consumed entire star systems before going dormant centuries ago. If they were truly awakening, it would represent the greatest threat the galaxy had ever faced. How long do we have? Unknown. Their scout ships have been detected in 17 systems so far, all of them uninhabited. But if they follow their historical patterns, they'll begin attacking populated worlds within the year. Elder Velthara touched Hyajin's arm with one graceful hand. "My dear, I see the weight of responsibility in your eyes. You're wondering if the Alliance is strong enough to face such a threat. Am I that obvious?" The ancient Thylorian smiled. "You are your father's daughter." He used to make that same expression when he was trying to solve impossible problems. Through the observation window, they could see the fleet beginning to disperse as representatives returned to their homeworlds. Over 300 species, working together, sharing technology and resources, united by the principle that no peaceful people should face extinction alone. Yo.